How you doing? Welcome to the weekly Q&A. I'm actually sending an important email right now, so bear with me. This is something what we do as journalists. But welcome to the Q&A. Thank you for joining us. I appreciate it. We do this for you guys, and it's always a great situation. We have a lot of fun doing it. So obviously. Obviously, the Raiders are in the third week of phase 3 of OTAs, an important time of year. They wrap things up next week with their mandatory minicamp. I think it's July 14th, 15th, and 16th, or June 14th, 15th, and 16th. So a lot of work being done and happening out at the facility in Henderson. As we've seen recently, there's been some roster tinkering, not unusual for this type of year. For this time of year, as teams kind of get a good look at what they have roster-wise and start making decisions, as the Raiders have on, hey, how do you feel about the offensive line or the linebacker group or the cornerback room? Remember, they didn't have this last year. To them, it was literally draft, free agency, and then right to training camp because there were no offseason programs. So really, the first time the Raiders saw each other last year, coaches and players included, was in training camp, and that's kind of hard to do. It's much better, and this is why OTAs are so important for the coaches and the talent evaluators and the decision makers to really get a good look at where the roster is at this point in the year to make some decisions on how comfortable or not comfortable they are with certain position groups heading into training camp. So without further ado, I'd like to start answering some questions. I got these on Twitter. And you guys can tweet at me however you guys want to do it. But 20 Raiders 21 asked, I know it's early, but how does the defense look? How do the players feel about Gus Bradley's scheme and his presence and what he brings? I think it's really interesting in talking to some players about Gus Bradley, and what I think it should be really encouraging for Raiders fans is the relationship building that he's doing right now. I think that's where it always starts. I thought last year, looking at that defense for the first time as covering the Raiders, from start to finish, I felt like that defense last year was really disconnected. There were communication errors. There was either a lack of confidence or lack of understanding in the scheme and what was asked of players. And I think that reared its ugly head, all of those things, including injuries and COVID-19 and the lack of foundation that they were able to build during OTAs last year. I think all of that reared its ugly head throughout the season, and very specifically, during critical moments, third and longs, third down plays. The Raiders were one of the worst teams in the league at getting teams off the field on third downs, late game situations. We've talked so many times about that Chiefs game. A minute 43, the offense gave the defense the lead late in the game. And the Miami Dolphins, 19 seconds left in the game. The Dolphins started that drive at their own 25, 19 seconds left in the game, no timeouts. The Raiders lost that game. The Raiders lost that Chiefs game. And then in overtime, after kicking a field goal, they couldn't hold a lead against the Chargers. And that's where the defense broke down so often. And I felt like anyway, there was a communication problem. There was a confidence problem, maybe a teaching problem. And what I think Raider Nation should feel encouraged about is how players are talking about how Gus Bradley is sitting them down, talking to them, getting to know them, building a relationship outside of just football, because I think that's where the trust level begins. Once you get that part of it and get that buy-in from players, emotionally, physically, obviously, intellectually, everything else kind of falls into place. The X's and O's, they'll grasp that, they'll understand that. But believing in it and teaching it and giving them some sense of ownership by allowing them to talk and communicate, I think helps. So first and foremost, that's what I've noticed in talking to players. Things that you didn't quite hear about under the last staff, not to point any fingers at Paul Guenther. But I also think from a personnel standpoint, I think you're seeing the depth on the defensive line, even without Yannick Ngakoue out there. You see that it's just deeper. There's more skill sets. There's more players that look more talented than they have in the past. I think you see the depth in the secondary as well. The cornerback position seems deeper. The safety position, obviously, with the drafting of Trayvon Morig and Tyree Gillespie, just looks, then bringing in Carl Joseph, it looks deeper and better. So early impressions of the defense is you can see that there's more talent on hand, and I think the communication is going to be better as well. Also, going to go out to C-Ray. How long will it take Gus's defense to settle down this year? Offenses are typically slower to break in as the season starts. So the defense, it's going to have to happen quick. The Raiders start the season against a big physical football team in the Baltimore Ravens at home at Allegiant Stadium on that Monday night. And then a week later, another big physical, traditionally tough-nosed football team in the Pittsburgh Steelers. That's back-to-back to start the season. And the defense is going to have to bring the hard hats on. They're going to have to, especially when they go into a loud environment like Pittsburgh, be on the same page, have a chemistry developed, have an understanding of the defense. There's no waiting around. I know that a 6 or 17 game season is a long season, and even if you stumble out of the gate, there's plenty of time to be able to regroup and get it back together. But I think that this Raider team really wants to make a statement early on, physically, that they're better defensively, build some confidence that can sustain throughout the rest of the season. I think you do that by showing up day one, and that day one is against Baltimore. Will there be a learning curve? Of course. It's a new defense and it's a new system. There are some new players, but I think going back to what we talked about earlier, that communication level between Gus Bradley, his coaching staff, and the players is going to help mitigate that and get it back on track, or get it on track earlier or sooner rather than later. So let's go to Raiders. Chris, any idea what the starting secondary will look like? Interesting question. From my understanding is the Raiders are still in the process of deciding who those two safeties are going to be. I think realistically, it'll be Trayvon Morig at that free safety position, Jonathan Abram at that box safety position, Trayvon Mullen one cornerback, and then it gets a little dicey, doesn't it? Is it going to be Damon Arnett at that other perimeter cornerback spot, or is it going to be Casey Hayward, or is it going to be Casey Hayward or Damon Arnett in the slot? Or does Amik Robertson make a move? Or does the rookie Nate Hobbs make a move at slot cornerback? So I think the Raiders are, kind of trying to hammer it down a little bit and get a better idea before training camp. And again, this is why OTAs were so important. They're trying to get it figured out. And I think they want some answers before training camp starts. Now, obviously, once the pads come on, different guys show up. Certain guys take step forwards, other guys take steps back. So that'll be the ultimate arbitrator, but I really believe that the Raiders want to have a pretty good handle on that starting secondary before they get to training camp. So it'll be interesting next week in minicamp if we have a little bit more access to see kind of who's starting at what positions more often than not. Raiders 43, when will Diablo actually get on the field? Raider 43 is talking about Divine Diablo, and I think it's probably going to be when he signs his contract. And I think that he's there. He's been taking part in everything. So, I don't think that there's any kind of like worry about that or anything like that. It's not like he's completely holding out and is not doing anything. He's been part of of that whole program. It's just that he's not getting on the field. So, that's that. When he gets on the field, I think is when he signs his contract. That's kind of my guess about the situation. Going to go out to AM. Wants to know, after the first couple of weeks of OTAs, which position group has impressed and which still needs some work. That defensive line looks deeper and better, and I think what's encouraging about that's without Yannick Ngakoue being out there. So add him to the mix, and all of a sudden it gets even deeper and better. I believe that's good news. I think the secondary looks better. I think that running back, even without Josh Jacobs out there, just seeing Kenyon Drake, I think that's a position group that looks pretty good. It's hard to tell with the wide receivers. I want to see them now in some 11-on-11s and some spirited competition. But he Sorry about that, guys. Some technical difficulties. Going to pick off with, or pick up with Jim, Forever Slump. Who jumps higher, Max or Carr? Is Andre James as billed by Cable, or has Martin stepped in for reps? How are the reps split basically? Andre James looked pretty good to me, and again, going back to what I was saying earlier, can't wait for the pads to get on. That's always the great differentiator. So I don't have any doubts that Andre James is going to be able to bring it physically, but from a mental side, and that's kind of what a lot of this is all about. He looks pretty good. I don't know who can jump higher than Max or Carr. I'm going to go Derek Carr, just strictly on jump. But I mean, Max Crosby is what, 3-4 inches taller than he is, has probably a reach advantage. So I think, if you're talking about who could touch what higher, I think probably Max, because he's bigger and taller. So, but both of them are pretty good athletes. I have to give them credit. Attic wants to know, are we going to win the Super Bowl this year? Attic, I think that first and foremost, I think the Raiders should be focused on improving defensively, getting to the quarterback more often, creating more turnovers, getting teams off the field on third downs. And I think if they can get that squared away, I think you can start realistically talking about competing for a postseason berth, and then let the chips fall where they may. Super Bowl, I'm not going there yet. I don't. It's just way too soon for anything like that. Where is Josh Jacobs from? And this is from Mike McLaren. Touched base with some people over the weekend, and I think everyone's on the same page with that. Let's put it that way. And I think that Josh is doing his thing. I think there's confidence from the team and the coaching staff that he's taking care of business, and so I think everyone's okay with that. I do think probably we'll see, but generally speaking, when it gets to the mandatory phase of OTAs, which is next week, guys that aren't here get here. So we'll see if Josh is here next week, along with Yannick Ngakoue. Those are the two prominent players that have not been on the field during OTAs thus far. Let's see. Okay. Bo Schembechler Jackson. Here's one. Will John address whether Bradley helped himself scout this offseason? As in, can John correct his late season failures with help from a DC who knows him and Derek so well? I mean, I think when I look at that team last year, I thought all the offense didn't play perfect, but no offense does play perfect. When you score the 10th most points in the game, and yeah, I understand that there were some issues scoring touchdowns in the red zone. They got better than they were the year before in the red zone in terms of scoring touchdown, and their overall efficiency was better in the end zone. But let's be honest, that offense left the field 3 times over the second half of the season with 1:43 left against the Kansas City Chiefs, 19 seconds left against the Miami Dolphins, and in overtime against the Chargers with the lead. The defense couldn't get the job done. If the defense gets the job done, you're talking about an 11-win Raiders team. And so, I mean, I hate to be simplistic about it, but that's the truth of the matter right there, So, you can the failures, I think the failures were defense. And I think if you want to ask if John Gruden did himself scouting, well, he got rid of the defensive coordinator, brought in a new defensive coordinator who he respects and is close with, and Gus Bradley. And I'll also say this, even during the season last year, when I would check in periodically, kind of in a behind the scenes manner, which you often do as a reporter, even when they were 6-3, trust me when I say this, there were no delusions within, the Raiders building that they were some perfect team. Even at that point, the message consistently was, got a lot of work to do, got to figure out a way to get to the quarterback more often, got to fix that defensive line, got to get better defensively. That was when they were 6-3. So I don't think anyone needed to self-scout to figure out there's some issues here defensively, and even had the defense held on in those games against the Chiefs and Dolphins and Chargers, it wouldn't have glossed over the fact that there was major work that needed to be done talent-wise, guys getting better coaching, staying away from injury, guys being more available. There was nothing that was going to gloss over the fact that that defense was still a major piece of work, or in the process. So self-scouting, every team does that. Does John Gruden understand where some of the big issues were? Yes, defense number one, getting to the quarterback first and foremost, creating turnovers first and foremost, number two, getting teams off the field on third down, critical area that they feel like they need to get better in, obviously. And offensively, you just in talking to Raiders people, run the ball better. I think you saw some changes that they made to the offensive line that I think were a part of that objective. Josh Jacobs elevating the yards per carry average. He was in the high fours his rookie year, fell below 4 his second year. That needs to get better. Running the ball more efficiently, getting Henry Ruggs more involved, keeping him healthy, getting him better. Brian Edwards, incorporating Foster Moreau into the equation. I think all of those things are areas that the Raiders are absolutely focused on, and scoring more touchdowns in the red zone as well. So, did he need Gus Bradley to point that out? No, he knows. Trust me when I say that. He knows and knew what the flaws of this team were, and that at some point in the season you do the best you can, trying to not gloss over, but protect some of the flaws, and try to accentuate the strengths. But you're always in a constant objective quest of getting better and figuring out and ways to get better. But there are also times where you just had to put things on the back burner because you just can't go making massive roster changes during the season. That happens off the season, when the next offseason comes along. So I think by the moves that they made, shows you that they understood what the issues were. So hopefully that answers your question. I want to say thanks to everybody that tuned in today. Thank you very much. We really appreciate the support. We do this for you guys, and all the podcasts, everything we write, all the photos that we put up on the site, Vegas Nation, vegasnation.com. If you want to do the app is Vegas Nation. Go online, vegasnation.com. Everything that you want from a Raiders perspective is there, and we're proud to do it and happy to do it. And we'll talk to you guys next week.